When you were chief of police, what type of relationship did you have with your subordinates, administrative staff, and your police officers?
Well, I manage by walking around, and I manage by having objectives listed. And so my ability was to make sure that I was visible in staff meetings. I was visible when there were major investigations. I was visible in the community. And as a result, and with the support and the input of our staff, we were able to create a 5-year strategic plan that the department never had before. That wasn't the Bob Spinks plan, that was the police department's plan. That was eventually adopted by the city council, and it was funded, and it continues to move forward today. Putting together really what I believe is the report to the stockholders is an annual report. How much crime do you have? What in the world did you do with that $5 million? You know, is crime up, down, calls up, down? You know, who got trained? I think that's critical. And in putting those annual reports together, again, that wasn't Bob Spinks. It was the staff participating in creating their report to the community. So, yeah, was I participatory? Yes. We had weekly staff meetings with the command staff, and we had all hands meetings with the entire police department so that there was two-way communication. And while I believe in participatory management, at the end of the day, I really believe the police chief is also a coach. So when it's time to go out and actually run the plays, we've already kind of decided how to do it participatory. Now we're going to go do it in an organized fashion, and I'm going to lead that.
As chief, what type of structure would you bring to the police department? What type of changes would you make?
You know, I think it would be arrogant for me to give you specifics, but I think I can talk in the generality. You know, the evolution of law enforcement today has made sure that those organizations are less empirical and more flat, so that you are providing the maximum amount of service and giving your patrol staff, your officers, the ability to make decisions without having to go through 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 people. I don't like that. So I would look to make sure that the agency is streamlined. I would look to create a strategic plan with the staff. I would look for outside sources to come in and avail ourselves of the input from other Mississippi chiefs and come up with a list or a game plan for the agency to follow for the next 5 years.
Last question, what type of steps would you take to improve morale within the department as chief?
Well, again, I would use the analogy of, you know, the football coach. You know, coaches come and go. That's a reality. The average police chief in America is like 4 years. And it would be nice to be able to find a position that you could call home. Now, honestly, that's one of the reasons that I'm looking at Columbus. I did not start or intend to be the agent of change and rebuild 3 police departments. That's just what I ended up doing. But I think that has put me in a position to come to Columbus and to be the head coach, hopefully for the rest of my tenure. That's what I'd like to do. I think as a coach, you know, with morale, you want to try to make sure and you want to fight for your staff to have the best training that they can possibly have, to have the best equipment, to have the best resources to police smart and effectively. So I'm going to provide that environment. I'm going to provide an agency which will move toward being accredited in Mississippi. That to me just makes sense. You wouldn't send your kids to an unaccredited college, university. You wouldn't go to an unaccredited hospital. Why would you not want to have an accredited law enforcement agency? I think you and the citizens of this town deserve that. I think those are the things that lead toward morale. Now, there's lots of times when people say, morale is bad, it's down. You know what? I bring my own morale to work each and every day. My morale and my motivation to do a good job as a law enforcement officer, that starts with me. I'll lead that way. I will provide the expertise and the ability for this department to be the very best in the state of Mississippi. But morale, I guess that would be one thing I would teach the staff. Bring your best game, because I'm going to demand it as a coach.
Thank you. Councilman Taylor. Councilman, we was notified that the citizens that are watching these interviews cannot hear us when we asking questions, so if you would you speak in the mic, please? Thank you.
Chief, if you're selected for this position, what are some of the objectives and goals you could bring to the department?
Yeah, well, again, I think it would be presumptuous of me to give you very specifics. But I think what I can tell you, and it makes perfect sense, is that number one, I'm going to be a sponge to listen to you and the community at large. And I'll be very aggressive in being out in the community to generate that input as to what people think is good, bad, and indifferent. I think just as critically important is that almost from day one, when you start meeting with your police staff, is to start identifying with them what they think has been effective, what has not been effective, where they think the department should go, what they believe, given the current resources that they have to live with and work with, what can we achieve or what can't we achieve. And I think that's the beginning of your strategic plan. You take that information along with looking at law enforcement accreditation, and you start to build a road or a map that both your staff sees, your community understands, and which you as city councilors and the mayor can adopt and also support. That's what I would do.
So what was, when you first stepped off the plane out there, your flight when you landed here, what did you think of our city?
Well, it's pretty doggone dark. You know, but I did have an opportunity, you know, from afar. I mean, all the candidates have done this. We've read the blogs, we've read the newspapers, you know, we've listened and looked at, you know, clips from, what is it, WCBI? Did I get that right? Okay. You know, those are important. I've got a stack of information from the Chamber of Commerce. I spent today walking Main Street, shaking hands, and talking to people. Got some interesting feedback, good, bad, and different. And was able to walk around on the university campus a little bit. And so what drew me here continues to draw my interest. I think somebody in one of the blogs asked, well, why in the world did this guy move 2,500 miles? Number one, I'm in a great position in my career to be able to do that. Kids are grown. You know, my wife and I, we can. And so looking at an inventory that was appealing to me, well, there's a university. Economic development has been successful. Weyerhaeuser's in town, Eurocopter's in town. You know, that's, you look around the United States, it's not a pretty picture in a lot of communities. There is a unique history which not all towns have, and I love history. The fact that you have what I believe is a properly staffed police department, and I compared your agency with the other agencies of comparable size and population in the state, your staffing looks adequate. And so those were all positives. And again, what I saw on the ground today, I like. So hopefully what you see tonight, you'll like as well.
Thank you.
Councilman Mickens.
Good evening, Mr. Spinks. How you doing?
I'm doing very well, thank you, sir.
Hopefully we can walk you in some places where they have more lights at.
Hey.
You know, we're not a dark city, okay? My first question, Mr. Spinks, is if elected, I heard you mention in one of the other councilmen, the mayor question, that you believe in mobility, moving around within the department. So I'm assuming you can learn whatever you can, be more versatile in what you're doing. But my question is, if selected and you do become the chief here in the city of Columbus, how long do you plan on remaining in this situation?
You know, I think I mentioned earlier, my intent here is not to have to come and rebuild, be the agent of change, and then leave. You know, the downside is walking a thin line of being an agent of change when appropriate, but also hoping that your tenure will survive. You know, my interest in coming here is I have no other interest to go to another police department. And quite frankly, I would sign a contract to that. I think really the biggest challenge, you know, becomes one of politics. You know, can I survive in the political world of Columbus for 5 or 10 or 15 years? And, you know, that's a mutual process. While this council may well be the individuals who hire me today, and I may do a great job for you 2 years, 4 years, 6 years, 8 years down the road, there may be an entirely different group of people that I would be addressing here. And they may not necessarily have the same ownership, you know, of Bob Spinks as your police chief as you may during your tenure. But I can tell you my interest is to stay here. Again, one of the very neat things about this community that I think is that you are properly staffed. You do have a good facility. You do have a university in town. You do have employment. You have 85 churches. And I bring that up because often overlooked is the value of the faith-based community when it comes to crime prevention. And I truly believe that that is another resource that needs to be looked at. I just have a feeling that if you could mobilize 85 different churches, you could probably snuff out a lot of crime. And to that end, I'll give you an example. I was a police chief in Oregon. I arrived in town, went to Safeway to get a soda pop the day before my interview. Right across from Safeway, there was a Hispanic neighborhood, overtly Hispanic. I came walking out to my car, there's a shooting going on. I thought this was a small town. I've been down in Southern California. I thought I left all that, you know, behind. When I was hired as chief, that neighborhood had essentially been taken over by Hispanic gang members. There was open drug dealing, and this is not a huge city going on. And instead of just taking the traditional heavy enforcement, which we had to do, we created a chaplains program. Hispanic community, chaplains program, good partnership. That opened up some doors that quite frankly were going to be shut in our face. Not necessarily because people in that neighborhood didn't trust the police, but there was also the potential of illegal aliens. Now, do you want to talk to the police and potentially be deported? Do you want to report something to the police? How's that going to work? I was concerned with the safety of the community. So we reached out to the Mexican Consul General's office in Portland, Oregon. They came over, respected the fact that we were trying to build a partnership with the community that they had obviously a connection with. Created a neighborhood watch program, developed a 2-county gang task force as a result of this problem, and to this day, 15 years later, that's the safest neighborhood in that town.
Mr. Spinks, how would you describe your management style?
You know, very simple. I manage by objectives, which gets back to having a strategic plan, a map, an annual report, a list of expectations which I can share with you as to what we can or can't do each year. And I manage by walking around. You know, very simply, I'm not the kind of guy that likes to be hung up in a desk all the time. I recognize the importance of that, you know, that you have to do that. But maybe it's because I worked too many nights as a young officer. You know, at my last police department, there were times that I was there at 10 o'clock at night. There was times I'd come in on graveyard.